2024 might have brought us $42 eyeshadow duos, but in 2025, the pendulum seems to be swinging the opposite direction. And consumers are trading their expensive beauty products and treatments for DIY options and low-maintenance alternatives. The beauty industry is scrambling, okay? And not just from a product perspective, but from a services perspective as well. And today I want to talk about all of that. We'll talk about the recession blonde phenomenon, how DIY beauty is overtaking salon services, and how our current beauty trends are evolving in a direct response to economic uncertainty.
So how's the economy? Well, hasn't been good for a while, seems like my indicators tell me.
Lately, I've been seeing the phrase recession blonde or even recession brunette or just recession hair buzzing around on the internet. So what is it? Vogue defines it as the darker, more brown tinted hue that many are letting grow in with their normally bright golden strands. Also noting that many are opting out of their touch-up appointments to save money. If you are currently blonde or have ever had fake blonde hair, you know how expensive it is to upkeep that color. Now, of course, this is going to depend widely based on where you live and what salon you're going to. I know here in New York, it is not unusual for salons to be charging $500 to $600 for a full head of highlights. And that's a service that's suggested to be touched up every 6 to 8 weeks. So assuming that cost and that schedule, you're looking at a few $1,000 every year just to have blonde hair. So enter recession blonde. Hair colorists are sharing that their clients are opting for alternatives to their normal look in order to save money. Both from the perspective of that initial appointment cost, but also considering the upkeep. You know, maybe a style with a smudged root, with a bit of a shadow root, something that's going to grow out a little bit more naturally than that really stark highlight, more of an ombre look, something closer to your natural color. And I actually surveyed my subscribers to get your input on this. I shared a survey over on my community tab, and one of the questions that I asked was if you had recently changed your hair color to something that required less upkeep and money, like going back to your natural color or opting for a more rooted blonde. And at the time that I'm filming this, 63% of you said that you had. That's a pretty significant majority. Allure, who also did an article about recession blonde, writes, Minneapolis-based colorist Joy Johnson says she used to see the average color client every 4 to 6 weeks. Some of those clients are only coming twice a year now. Now, salon services are incredibly expensive, and that's not a judgment on stylists because I know that their time and their expertise is valuable, but it is unfortunately the reality. And one of the responses in my survey noted that a trip to the salon cost her about as much as going to the doctor. And obviously, if you have to choose between the two, the answer is obvious. But it's not just color services at the salon that are expensive. Another survey response says, I'm a Black woman and a constant conversation we have in the community is how much prices have gone up for protective styles like braids. I've seen stylists charge $1,000 or $300 for the same style. And all I know is that prices have gone up dramatically, and when I decide to get my hair done, I have to do a ton of research to find good quality work for a decent price. Another response said, the upkeep feels never ending, especially with highlights and lash extensions. It's not something you can eventually stop doing. The cost goes on forever, which is why I had to let it go. I talked about that idea actually in a previous makeup musings video. I've heard it coined as the hot girl hamster wheel because it's not one singular service that you are paying for. You are now locked into upkeeping that on a very consistent basis. So it makes sense that instead people are seeking out alternatives that don't need to be upkept as frequently. And we've seen hair salons start to pivot because of this. The Glossy, which was another publication that discussed this phenomenon, interviewed a stylist saying, I started offering what I call the root and run. So you just come in, I throw on a base color for mostly gray coverage clients, and then they run out after I wash them, no blow dry. And this is obviously a lower expense because less is being done in the salon. All of the articles discussed alternatives that clients are seeking out from their hairstylist. So maybe instead of doing a full head of highlights, they're just doing some like face framing brightness in the front. That way the hair can still really pop without needing to process the entire head for that higher expense. And beyond even this shift in services, salons are finding other ways to pivot to regain or at least sustain their customer base. And a fascinating one that I've been observing is a membership-based service model. And this actually spans beyond even just hair salons, but I have seen this popping up everywhere. Businesses that you wouldn't think would need to utilize a subscription model are doing it anyways. Like everything has a subscription these days. And now we're seeing it pop up at salons for hair services, but also at med spas, nail salons. Everything in beauty is offering subscription services these days. And maybe I'm just overly aware of this because I live in New York and I feel like every new business in New York is running under this like subscription-based service model where you pay a monthly amount to get a discounted price. And I have so many thoughts on this because generally, yes, you will get a lower price for the service if you are signing up for a membership. But you also have to account whether or not you would be going as frequently as you are to break down the math of whether it's actually a savings to you. I've noticed a lot of like med spas will say, you know, we have this monthly subscription. You can pay $275 for this facial and every month you can come in and get it. And that seems like a really significant discount compared to the full price, which is $400. I'm making these numbers up for an example here. And yes, there is that cost savings for that singular appointment, but there might be an added cost to you now because you're going to be going way more frequently and still spending more in the long run because you're opting for this service-based model. Also, as an aside, I have that same thought when it comes to a lot of like streaming subscriptions. If you only keep your streaming subscription to stream one show, if you have like your comfort show, you would save money if you just go out and buy like a box set DVD of that. I know a lot of people don't have DVD players anymore, but like if you bought that show, you would save money as opposed to maintaining that subscription only to watch that show. But anyways, that's for a separate conversation. But even with these new subscription-based models, these shifts in services provided at salons like the root and run option, in-person services are having a hard time competing with at-home DIY beauty. Returning to my survey, at the time that I'm filming this, 71% of you shared that you have considered DIY beauty treatments as an alternative to salon services. Granted, obviously the pool that I have in my survey is very niche to my subscribers. We naturally will have similar interests. It's a very specific audience. It's not necessarily going to be reflective of everyone, but at the time I'm filming this, I have about 700 responses that were kind of pooling info from here, and I think that's a pretty significant number to know that almost 3/4 of you are now turning to DIY options. Now I'm really excited to talk about this segment of the video because I am a lifelong DIY girl. Like this is very much in my wheelhouse. I was DIYing these beauty treatments before it was cool. And I don't mean that in like, I was doing it before it was cool way. I mean that from the perspective of I was doing these things before we had good options to do them with. Like I was DIYing my own lash extensions a decade ago before we had so many brands offering really easy at-home ones. I was doing it in questionable ways. I have been cutting and coloring my own hair since I was in college, which now I would say that's been over a decade. Don't judge it based on my current hair though, because I desperately need to tone it, but I have not had a chance to get to Sally's. That being said, I don't know if dyeing your own hair is for everyone. It's something I would recommend with so much caution, but a hack that I will give if you still want a salon quality service but you don't have the budget for it is to go to your local beauty school. You will get a fantastic cut or color at a fraction of the price. But as I was saying, I have been DIYing these beauty treatments for well over a decade now before we really had the right and the best products to do them with. But now in 2025, beauty has gone DIY. And press-on nails are probably the most compelling example of this. When I asked you in my survey of the DIY treatments that you do, that was the #1 response by far. 72% of respondents said they have tried or currently use press-on nails. And press-on nails as a search term has been gaining traction consistently since 2017. As someone who has been dabbling in press-on nails for well over a decade now, I have to say we have way better options today than we used to. My nails when I was doing them in college, they looked bad. They did look bad. I didn't want to believe it at the time, but looking back, and especially looking at the press-ons I do now, it is like night and day. A lot of the ones you can buy at the store now look almost identical to what you could get done at a salon, and they are a fraction of the price. And we're seeing this pivot from brands as well. A lot of beauty brands that have specialized in other categories before, maybe nail polish in particular, are now really pivoting heavily into press-on nails. Or a lot of lash brands are now really leaning into press-on nails, which I think is a very strategic pivot, especially because people tend to be wearing lashes less now than they were maybe 5 to 6 years ago. I think of Glamnetics especially, they make some of my favorite press-on nails. They used to mostly be seen as a lash brand, but now when you hear the word Glamnetic, you probably think of their press-on nails. There's suddenly a huge market for hair gloss, for temporary hair coloring treatments, for at-home keratin treatments, for anything hair related, really. The amount of brands that are launching DIY lash extensions made very simple. Brow tinting, I've seen some people doing their own lash lift, their own lash tint. I would exercise caution with those. Even things like doing your own waxing at home or even your own laser at home for laser hair removal, a lot of you answered those as well. But I also think this plays into the conversation about beauty devices, which was something I talked about in my predictions for 2025, that we would see a big boom in skincare devices, things like LED masks, like microcurrent devices. And I know on some level that might feel antithetical to this conversation about beauty budgeting and saving money on beauty, because generally those tools are pretty expensive, but it really falls back into this overall theme of doing things at home instead of going into a salon to get a service done. And especially for a consumer that was previously getting a lot of facial treatments done at perhaps a med spa, it actually would be more cost effective a lot of the times to invest in something like a red light mask that would cost similar amount to a treatment they would be having done in office. And this is something they can continue to use over and over. But even these DIY alternatives that consumers have been forced to turn to might become unattainable as well. This is a video that the founder of Glamnetic shared on her TikTok, sharing her fear of how tariffs will impact her business and others in the beauty space.
Most brands are not going to survive this tariff war. And even for a business like ours that is very stable and profitable, we are now going to be going in the red. And we're in the nail business, and there's no way to produce that in the US. There is no factory for press-on nails, and the best factories in terms of craftsmanship is in China. There's a couple that we're looking to in Vietnam, but even then that's like a 48% tariff rate. What's going to happen is it's going to get passed down to the consumer. There is no way that a company will be able to stay afloat and absorb all of this. They will definitely pass it on to the customer. I have no idea where this is going. I don't think anyone is, so we'll see.
Now, like I've said, I've tried a lot of these DIY things. I have a lot of thoughts on press-on nails. I have a lot of thoughts in general on DIY beauty, but I figured it might be helpful if I leave linked down below my favorites from these categories. So if you are leaning into a DIY approach for your nails, for like a hair gloss, I will have all my favorites linked down below, plus some additional thoughts on things I've tried that maybe I do not like as much. But continuing with the conversation of this DIY approach of learning and being self-taught when it comes to beauty, we're also seeing tutorials back in the limelight. Business of Fashion just released an article declaring that the tutorial is back, and talking about how viewers are very hungry for content about learning. And specifically as it pertains to tutorials, they're leaning on professional makeup artists to share their expertise. And in a way, I view a lot of connection there with this idea of self-taught, do it yourself, do it at home. But we're really seeing all of this manifest in our current beauty trends. We're seeing this through line of no cost or low cost beauty really line up with this like lower maintenance approach. Starting with the no mascara trend that we talked about a ton in my makeup musing series last year. You know, it's felt like an inevitable response to the popularity of lash extensions a few years prior. Lash extensions are incredibly expensive to upkeep. We're looking anywhere from $150 to $300 for a set. That's a major expense that a lot of people are having to forego right now. And instead, you're kind of left with two options. You can go the DIY route, where we talked about, where a lot of brands are now offering an easy at-home option, or you can go with a no lash look, which has also been gaining popularity, unsurprisingly. Also in the theme of people swapping out their expensive beauty treatments for no cost options, It has been reported extensively that the bush is back. Even last year, Mason Margiela debuted this on the runway where their models were wearing sheer gowns where you could see the body hair. Well, it wasn't real body hair in the show, but this idea fits very neatly into this theme of people choosing not to go in and get in-office treatments done. Less waxing, less laser. We could even say that heatless hairstyles fall under this umbrella. They have been wildly popular the last few years. Again, feels unsurprising that people are now choosing the free option instead of using a $600 Dyson Airwrap to style your hair. Why not use a pair of your socks that you already have? Granted, beauty brands have tried to capitalize on heatless curls, and we're now seeing them launch tools that can be ideal for that. And granted, that's not entirely new, but they're definitely more popular these days than they were a few years back. But at the heart of most heatless hair trends is the idea that you can do it at home with things you already have. You do not need to go buy a new tool to achieve it. But unsurprisingly, these beauty brands are really making that pivot alongside consumers. This theme is heavily represented in beauty launches right now. Probably the best illustration of this is the body spray boom. Instead of spending $200 on a luxury bottle of perfume, now you can buy a $25, $30 body spray that'll give you a similar scent, might not last as long, but feels like a more affordable and attainable luxury right now. We're also seeing it reflected in multi-use beauty products. Why buy a highlighter and a blush when you can use a product that gives you the effect of both, giving you a little bit of glow to the cheek in addition to color? Many people have also pointed out the increase in popularity of lipsticks and lip launches in general feels indicative of the lipstick index, which is a theory that suggests that a rise in lipstick sales tends to happen during times of economic downturn because consumers have to cut back on some of their higher priced expenses. So instead they're looking for these like small affordable luxuries. Now the merit of that is debatable, but it's undeniable that we're seeing a shift in beauty as a direct response to our current economy. More than half of the responses in my survey shared that you're now spending less on beauty today than you were 2 years ago. Many of you shared concerns about product cost and how tariffs will affect pricing across the board. I had many responses sharing that you're now opting for drugstore alternatives. One wrote, "Makeup has gotten insanely expensive these last few years. I've been buying more drugstore recently, e.l.f. and NYX in particular, and less on high end." Another response said, "The world is more expensive these days, so I'm really making efforts to shop my stash and enjoy what I have." And if that's how you're feeling right now, you are definitely not alone. I will leave a few links down below to videos where I talk about shopping your stash and other similar topics in case you want to check them out. But it's really interesting to watch this shift in the beauty world happening in real time and seeing how these external factors are influencing trends in this space. So I really hope you enjoyed today's makeup musings. Thank you so much for watching, and I will go ahead and see you in my next one. Bye.